So our first guest is a very, very special guest. Darl Oster, who is the head of ET3, has been involved in alternative transportation for decades, like 20 years. And it really, the fact that this event is happening today is very much due to his energy, his motivation, his insight into the importance of being able to put innovative concepts out there and to get them, to make them happen. I met Darl about a year ago, found out about ET3, found out about a foundation that was just beginning at that point, and was at that point invited to be part of that foundation. And collectively with the board, we decided to kind of rebrand the foundation just a little bit so that it was focused on a variety of alternative transportation needs, but ET3 is still very much kind of the flagship, and ET3 happens to be a gold sponsor of this event because of all the effort that they've put in, the information that they've provided, the support. So I really want to thank you for all the work that you've done to help get us here, and hopefully this will be a benefit for you as well as others. So Darl was trained as a mechanical engineer in Washington State, but his experience goes way beyond that. Involved with farming, involved with marine, aeronautical, and mechanical design and certification. He holds the patent for the many aspects of the ET3 technology, and it was very interesting when all this hubbub came out in August when Elon Musk kind of threw out this paper on the Hyperloop, and ET3 got woven into that conversation almost as if they were one and the same. For the most part, I think that was probably a benefit because it gave everyone an opportunity to really begin to understand what the differences were. And I know that Darl has been involved nonstop with dealing with phone calls and interviews and really being able to get the word out about this transportation option that he has been working on for a long, long time. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a chance to just tell the people what it's all about. Darl Oster.
Everybody having fun yet? Great, me too. I'm really, it's an honor to be here, and we're pretty excited about all these innovations in transportation that are on the verge of taking place. Can everybody hear me okay, even if I step away a little bit here?
No, you need to be close to the mic.
Okay. How many people traveled here by bus? One person. Wow. Okay, cool. One person traveled here by bus. How many have been on a bus? Okay, so we all know how to use them. And buses come here from a lot of places, but yet we prefer cars. If we had a choice of taking a taxi or taking a bus, how many of us prefer the bus? One hand. Okay? I definitely prefer the taxi. I've been on buses in LA that everybody had their shirts up around their it can be pretty rough on a bus. People prefer car-sized vehicles, family-sized units where you're in control of your space. A lot of people say that we are claustrophobic, but that's kind of another issue. I'm getting sidelined here. 500 years ago, when the Spanish came to this world, they brought the horse. The Native Americans said that's a gift from the gods. It doubled their standard of living in less than a generation. The ability for transportation. It's the master key to survival on this planet. If we can't get to food and water, or food and water can't be brought to us, we perish. So even if we live in big cities where we're within arm's length of everything that we can imagine, it all comes to that city by transportation. The water has to be transported in from way, way beyond the bounds of the city. The sewage has to be moved out. The garbage has to be moved out. So we all rely on transportation for our very lives. It was a gift from the gods. And then steam power displaced muscle power in less than a generation because it offered so much more value. And trains built America. And then government got involved to standardize everything and give away the land grants to stimulate bigger investments than any company was capable of with those land grants to provide more incentive for expansion to do what private industry couldn't do on its own. And then some guy named Henry Ford came along and started mass producing automobiles. And the value of cars and jets displaced trains to niche markets because of the vastly superior benefit to cost ratio. In the year 1910 in this country, 90% of Americans traveled between major cities by train. If trains are so wonderful, as we heard yesterday, why didn't they fail? Why didn't they maintain that 90% market share and actually increase it? Passenger trains would have died in the 70s if it weren't for gross government subsidy that is 40 to 50 times more dollars on a passenger mile basis goes to support trains than cars. So how many of us would like to buy a Tesla for $70,000? Okay, a few hands. How many of us would like a free Tesla? A free Tesla S. Okay, everybody's hands up. Every single seat on that light rail costs about $70,000 per seat. And that's not the expensive part. The expensive part's the infrastructure, and that is 100% paid by government. Us people that drive cars, we pay 100% of the cost of the car, but then as we operate it and pay our fuel and pay our tax buying the vehicle and pay our continuing use fees to government, we pay for those roads. Plus we pay for the vehicle, plus we pay for the operating expense. On that train, governments all across the country have to provide anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of the operating expense in addition. So 100% of the infrastructure cost, 100% of the vehicle cost, and anywhere from 1/3 to 2/3 of the operating expense. A bright guy said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is the definition of lunacy. So we've got to innovate, we've got to change, and we have to move forward. Like Elon Musk said, you know, we can't afford to build the most expensive and slowest high-speed rail system in the world, following the rest of the world's example that's actually following us, because high-speed rail, electric high-speed trains, were developed in Laurel, Maryland in 1889 by Mr. Weems. The rest of the world is following our example. You can't lead by following. And you certainly can't lead by following the followers that are following us. We've got to move ahead. We've got to advance. Transportation in evacuated environments is the most proven form of transportation in the universe. All of us our whole lives have been orbiting the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. The sun is orbiting the Milky Way at 200,000 miles an hour. Part of the time the Earth's velocity adds to the sun's velocity, 133,000 miles, or 267,000 miles an hour, and part of the time it subtracts from it, 133,000 miles an hour. We're traveling somewhere between those extremes right now in orbit around the Milky Way. The average human travels 200 billion miles through space during a typical lifetime. It's the most proven form of transportation in the universe. We're proposing bringing those travel conditions down to Earth. If everything is built to the same standard in every country, eventually ET3 can be networked together to cover the globe for our transportation virtually anywhere in the world, between any major city in the world. ET3 stands for Evacuated Tube Transport Technologies, are the 3 Ts. It's car-sized vehicles that are magnetically levitated, and they operate in tube infrastructure. It can also carry cargo, a couple pallets at a time, or a small, we call the moped vehicle, that can drive right into an empty capsule, and then you have a road vehicle when you get to your destination that can have a small 5 kilowatt motor and be able to achieve freeway speeds. So there is a little video here, if I can figure out how to do this without putting my glasses on. So how ET3 works is it's literally bringing space travel conditions down to Earth. In space, there's no friction. Now, there's a little bit of an error in both those tubes should be elevated, and they won't be transparent. They're shown transparent here so we can see the inner workings. The access portals are all offline, so it's like a car on a freeway. These car-sized vehicles, when that car-sized vehicle enters the airlock, that lower chamber, it pushes almost all the air out. The gate valve can close. The remaining air is evacuated with a standard vacuum pump. And then 2 pairs of gate valves open. That can enter the evacuated environment without letting any air in. Those 2 gate valves close. And now that lower chamber can exchange with the upper chamber so it can receive the inbound capsule. So the capsule itself does most of the work of pumping that down. Then that vehicle accelerates up to speed, merges into the flow of traffic just like a car merging onto a freeway, and it can be routed anywhere in the network like packets of information are routed through the internet. This is the first generation high temperature superconductor Maglev vehicle in China. That vehicle carried 35,000 people its first year of operation. It uses high temperature superconductor Maglev elements, that's yttrium, barium, copper oxide. When that little piece of ceramic material is brought down to liquid nitrogen temperature in the presence of a magnetic field, it levitates with almost no resistance. As low as 10 to the negative 7 has been measured as the coefficient of friction. Almost frictionless, and it doesn't rely on any electricity or electronics. You see the frost in that vehicle. That's one of the problems that has sidelined this particular Maglev technology, because any moist conditions, that suspension gap will eventually choke with ice. $3.50 worth of the liquid nitrogen levitates that car-sized vehicle that you saw Brendan and I riding in for 7 hours, 50 cents an hour levitation cost. And then, of course, linear motors like they use for roller coasters can accelerate these vehicles up to speed. Once they merge into the flow of traffic, in that evacuated environment of space travel conditions, they coast most of the trip. Only small little amounts of energy subtracted or added to the vehicle to keep its precise speed and spacing and timing. And then it can be routed anywhere in the network, just like packets of information are routed through the internet. So frequency versus vehicle size. When we make interchange philosophy does not restrict the frequency of vehicles that can use that infrastructure. Unlike a train that uses this physical moving switch, that time that it takes that physical moving switch to switch from one track to another limits the frequency of vehicles that can use that very expensive infrastructure to one vehicle every 5 or 6 minutes. With today's automation, is proven to be orders of magnitude more reliable than human switchboard operators. We can take what we've learned from telecommunication automation that is orders of magnitude more reliable and apply a lot of those elements to transportation. Google's doing that, in fact. But automating a vehicle in a chaotic environment is much more difficult than controlled conditions. Comfort issues. How many people feel comfortable in seats like this? How many would rather sit in something like this? The user experience. This is Mr. Clyde Mann, and Clyde is a science teacher from Warm Springs Elementary, and Clyde has inspired his whole school to have a National Science Day to get kids excited about math and science. And he invited us, and thanks to generous donations, he did some arm twisting and stuff from some of the wealthy people there in Silicon Valley to provide transportation expense for us to haul this mock-up out. This shows what it's like to sit in a capsule. This is the mayor, the guy that's the size of a sumo wrestler there in the middle. He's like, what, 6'6", would you say, Clyde?
No.
6'4"?
I think he's only about 2.
I mean, he hopped up in that capsule, and I asked him, I said, is that more or less comfortable than an airplane seat? And he said, I have never been comfortable even in a first-class airplane seat. He said, I could sit in here for hours. 100 years ago, it's amazing this ever took place, Henry Ford had to build a whole series of factories to mass-produce cars. He had to build a factory to process ore into iron. He had to build another factory to process iron into steel. He even had to build a glass factory. He had to build a bearing factory. He had to build a factory to make gears for the transmissions. Everything vertically integrated. It's amazing that it ever took place. Now, production capacity exists all over the world for building pipelines and tubes. A lot of that production capacity is automated. Anybody know where this is? This is the mouth of the Big Thompson Canyon, and this is taken a few months before this picture was taken. You see the tube's still there, the road isn't. This bridge in Lyons, washed away. Pretty close by, the railroad track, all the ballast washed out. The tube still stands. You can see the washout, one of the washouts in the railroad right there beside it. We're already there as far as the evacuation capabilities and technologies. This is the Ligo Observatory. It's a laser interferometer gravity wave observatory, and there's one in Louisiana. There's also another one in Hanford. That structure is 1.3 meters in diameter tube. It's a little bit smaller than optimal for ET3, but it has 50 kilometers of welds. It's evacuated to 10 to the negative 9 torr. That's 1,000,000 times higher quality vacuum than required for ET3. There's no such thing as a pure vacuum, so it's only approximation of a vacuum. The Tesla or Elon Musk with his Hyperloop is proposing either 99% vacuum or 99.9% vacuum. ET3 is about 99.9999% vacuum, so about 1,000 times better. This is 1,000,000 times higher quality vacuum than required for ET3. It had no measurable leaks without the vacuum pumps running for a period of 2 years. We've gotten very good at sealing the air out. This is in, there's one in Hanford, and this particular photograph is one in Louisiana. I don't remember the town. Look up LIGO, L-I-G-O, it's an acronym, and you'll get lots of information. There's a laser beam that bounces back and forth through a sapphire prism that weighs like 90 pounds, hanging at each end of this thing. It bounces back several thousand times. It's so sensitive when the space shuttle goes off in Florida, it can measure the Earth vibration. Linear motors are off-the-shelf items in roller coasters. The Maglev technology is, there are several proven forms. The high-temperature superconductor Maglev carries car-sized vehicles. And the most common man-made commodity in the world is awash with it. It naturally seeks its greatest return and minimum risk. There's plenty of money to do this. It's just minimizing that risk and maximizing that gain and demonstrating that in the real world. This guy right here is Frank Davidson. Anybody know who that is? Several? Exactly. He's the father of the English Channel Tunnel. And he told me, he was a member of the advisory board for many years. And Frank set up a conference in Normandy, and that's where this photograph is taken. And during that conference, it came out that the biggest challenges that he faced building that tunnel were not the technical issues, which were considerable, but 80 to 90% of it was political issues, diplomacy, So we've adopted an open consortium model where licensees now from all over the world, there's now 214 licensees in 20 countries, a lot of licensees here. In fact, maybe stand up if you're a licensee. So we are leveraging billions of dollars of capacities that already exist. A lot of those capacities are skills, a lot of those are intellectual properties, and a lot of those are production capacities. We are creating a new market for these skills. This is Dr. Kamada. He's a famous Japanese physicist who held the record for focusing a magnetic field at something like 4.5 Tesla. Infinitely variable focused magnetic field and linear accelerators and particle accelerators. He was at Fermilab for a lot of years. His wife Yumi is from Taiwan, and she's a CEO of a company that makes LED light bulbs. And they are both licensees and working to implement ET3 in Japan. This is the inventor. Professor Wang is a licensee from China. He is the inventor of the high-temperature superconductor Maglev. And these are the PhD candidate research students. 2 of them are in the United States now. We sponsored them to come to the United States. And they're now working, one's working at Stanford at the accelerator there, and the other one is working for a superconductor company in New York. Jack, would you come up here, please? Tell everybody about what these kids are doing.
A few years ago, I had a crazy idea. Different person introduced me to another person, and we ended up working with the EPICS students at the School of Mines, and that's their program for practical application of engineering skills. And I forgot what the P is for, but it's engineering, practical, introductory course sequence. You need big titles. And these students choose different projects to work on. There's 500 students, and they're usually 5 to 6 members per team. And the directors of the program give them group of technologies to work on, and it's their choice.
What are they working on this year?
And this team is working on aspects of ET3 evacuated tube stuff, and one of the teams is working on comparing ET3 with all other forms of transportation, safety issues, what's the best size capsule carrier of people. And the other team is working, we have 2 teams this year. We've had as much as 4, but the second team is working on modular application of the various features of ET3 tubes. So they're a huge spokesman for us, and it's been going on for 4 years. We've had as many as 25 students. This year we'll have 11, but you multiply that by 4 years, we have about 100 of these students involved in developing different aspects of ET3. And these kids are way smarter than I ever dreamed to be. And when I was a sophomore in college, I am impressed. I'm glad to see students here from the university over here visiting this. You guys are going to be the developers of the future and the real innovators. You're looking at pictures of them, okay? And we've got all of 100 and thanks, Darl, for supporting us over there.
Thank you, Jack. Jack served our country as a Navy fighter pilot and then flew 747s across the Pacific for a lot of years. Really a fantastic asset to the company. And I'd like to invite, if any of the licensees would like to come up here and just, say a brief 30 seconds of how and why you got involved with ET3. It's all about people. It's all a team effort, and it's an open consortium that anybody can get involved with. Tony's been working with ET3 for a long time. Ivan and Rick. Any of you guys want to say a word or two?
Okay. Well, well, my name is Ivan, and I found out about it a couple of years ago, and I saw it through the YouTube video, and that really moved me. And I was like, wow, that really changed my perspective on the fact that we live in a planetary society, and it's a beautiful thing. And ever since then, I mean, I met up with you and Nick in Sunnyvale, and it was amazing. From then on, I mean, I said, well, I'm going to dedicate my whole life to this, and this is truly it's a new movement, and it's a cultural movement. This is big. We have the opportunity to change the world here. So yeah, and Tony.
Thanks, Ivan.
Hi, everybody. I've been involved with ET3 the last 6 years, and started to discover it about 7.5 years ago. Didn't really have any information about it, but it all seemed to come to me, and I called Darl one day, and I said, I got a story to tell you, and struck up a wonderful friendship. And, here we are 6 years later, and a lot of great things have happened. But I'm involved with it because I recognized early on that this is an absolute necessity that we employ, and in time we will see that in the rearview mirror. So we're all here, looking at innovation in the future, and this is it. We're here right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Tony started a cell phone company and kind of moved the industry a big step towards the value proposition that it was. It was super expensive, and Tony's the one that figured out ways to dramatically lower the cost of ownership of cell phones, and a real innovator in the telecommunications industry.
That model has had $1 trillion effect on our economy, and ET3 will go far beyond that.
Rick.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Mulkern. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. How I got involved in ET3 is I ran for office back in 2005 for state senate. By the way, I lost by 3,000 votes. But one of my planks is PRT, and I was not aware of ET3, but I was asked by the St. Paul Pioneer Press, which is a fairly large paper in the Twin Cities area, about ET3, and that inspired me to find out more through telephone conversations and emails with Darl. I've been a licensee for about 1.5 years, and I'm just really excited about being a part of moving people like email. I'm just, we're really going to change the world. I do believe that.
Rick works with the. I'll let him tell you if he wants to tell you what he does, and I think it has a lot of applicability to ET3 as well.
One of my many jobs, I'm actually a major in the U.S. Army. I'm Army MP officer, and as well as I work for the Department of Homeland Security. I'm a TSA officer. So one of the things that I've done is after 9/11, I rolled out and federalized many airports across the nation, and that aspect of ET3 being a more secure way of moving people is also a reason why I'm involved in ET3 today.
Thank you. Galen, all the way from Montana.
Yeah, thanks, Darl. My name's Galen Calvert. I'm incorporated with a little corporation in Montana, Energy Technology Innovation Incorporated. And I have an advantage over most of you because I'm 86 years old, and I just want to spend the rest of my life in trying to see this thing go together for Darl. Met him 10 years ago or so. Know Tony. Tony's been over to when I was trying to be a farmer after years of of being in an office, and so whatever that I might be able to do to put something together, particularly for Montana, I'd want to do. I've been over to see some of the people there in Montana already that are in positions of authority. They understand what Daryl's talking about, and Montana would be a great place to get one of these things started. So that's all I have to say right now. God bless you.
Thank you, Galen. Galen has an incredible story that he has written down that someday will become a Hollywood movie. Galen heard a distress signal when he was a radio operator in the Navy when he was in his teens, and saved thousands of people. Thank you. Well, that's just a. Oh, great.
Thanks, Darl. Thanks, Darl. My name is Jordette. I'm from LA. I first heard about ET3 through the Zeitgeist movies. They were mentioning that about future transportation. And I saw the ET3 and I was like, that is awesome. So I immediately created a Google alert for ET3 and evacuated tube transport technologies. And it was crickets for a couple of years, didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden I got an alert that said, hey, there's this, it was the mayor of LA had put out a website asking for all the citizens of LA to submit their ideas on how to alleviate traffic. So I went on that, and somebody had submitted ET3, and if you like the idea, you second it, you hit the second button, and it had the most seconds, it had the most likes on Facebook. There was a whole onslaught of communication, people talking about it, saying this is cool, this not going to work because of this, oh, but it will because of this. So I went on et3.com and sent them a generic email and said, hey, somebody submit your thing to this website, you might want to check it out. And 45 minutes later, Nick Garzilli, who's the chief operating officer of ET3, calls me, and we had a great conversation. And then a week later, he texted me and said, I know it's late notice, but there's a house party tonight in L.A., and Darl and his wife Brenda are going to be there. You want to go? And I'm like, hell yeah! So I had a great conversation with Darl and Brenda, and after I was asking them all kinds of questions about ET3, and then I was like, you know what I do for a living, Darl? I build high-tech, state-of-the-art master control rooms. So when you start building this thing, I want to build your master control rooms and do all the integration of the audio and video. So we've been best friends ever since. Thanks, Darl.
Thank you, Jordette. Great. That was an amazing party, by the way. There was like fire eaters and fire jugglers, and pretty amazing place. Just amazing group of people all over the world. ET3 is now expanded to over 20 countries, and we've got projects going a lot of places. We really, as was said last night here, we have to have innovations in transportation. And innovations are not making a giant leap backwards to 100-year-old technology. It's moving forward. So if Southwest Energy Efficiency Project is really interested in energy efficiency, ET3 can provide it. We can build the infrastructure using 1/35 of the amount of concrete and steel compared to elevated high-speed rail. we can accomplish 50 times more transportation per kilowatt hour of electrical energy than the most efficient electric car or electric train. And it's real simple. When you have a vehicle that only weighs 400 pounds empty, but hauls the same 800-pound payload as a typical car, you only have 1,200 pounds of load to support compared to that 100-ton locomotive. So when you have a tunnel to bore, these maglev trains moving so fast through that tunnel that extreme pressure rise could damage people's ears when that train enters the tunnel at 350 miles an hour. So that's how big the tunnel has to be to be able to alleviate some of those problems. It's about 18 times as much rock and dirt to remove compared to a ET3 tunnel. And that ET3 tunnel, since the vehicles operate at high frequency, much higher frequency than cars on a freeway because it's automated, much more like automation of telecommunications, we can achieve 10 times the capacity to move people. 200,000 passengers per hour per direction compared to 20,000 passengers per hour per direction with that infrastructure that uses 35 times more concrete and steel. Hyperloop is a great step in the right direction compared to the California high-speed rail off in the extreme left. That massive infrastructure, those girders weigh about 550 tons of concrete to hold up a couple hundred tons of live load. Each one of those pillars weighs 90 to 100 tons. To support that load in a lot of soil conditions, they have to pound anywhere from 24 to 30 pilings as far as 250 feet down into the ground to support that massive load. ET3, by contrast, is only 13 tons of material for the same 25-meter span. A couple screw piles or helical piers screw down to the ground in 15 minutes and bolt in a support structure like you saw in some of those tubes going across Highway 66 in Lyons, and the other tube structure across Highway 34 on the Big Thompson Canyon. They can be bolted up in a matter of 15 minutes. And then another span, 25-meter span, bolted into place in 15 minutes using a 20-ton crane instead of a 200-ton crane that required to set those girders in place for the maglev train. Hyperloop's a big step in the right direction, but not nearly far enough. The cost of those tubes scales with about the diameter cubed. If you double the size of the tube, the cost is 8 times greater. So the number inside the tube with ET3, the 100, using that as a cost basis for the ET3 tube infrastructure, the tubes alone, not the tunnel. The Hyperloop for carrying passengers only in bus-sized vehicles of 28 passengers each, 3.15 times the expense. Just a little bit bigger in diameter. A little bit bigger yet in diameter, the one to carry the Tesla cars inside the vehicle would be 10 times the cost. High-speed rail is about 15 times the cost, or 20 times the cost. And the number on the outside of the tube, the 200, that's the tunneling cost to go underground. So to go underground, if you add those two together, it's about 3 times the cost to go underground versus above ground for ET3. Just the tunnel cost for the Hyperloop, the small Hyperloop, is double that cost because there's a lot more earth to remove. And then about 8 times the cost for the tunnel for the larger Hyperloop. The maglev, or not the maglev train, but the steel wheel train, 19 times greater cost. And that single pair of 5-foot diameter tubes can carry the equivalent of a 40-lane freeway at a design speed of 350 miles an hour. This is percentage of market share in the vertical axis from 0% up to 100%. The yellow curve on the top is automobile travel market share. The curve off to the extreme left in red is muscle-powered transportation. You can see the market gap between muscle power and automotive at a distance on the lower scale. There is distance in kilometers on a log scale. And so at about 0.2 of a kilometer, you can see that that is where it's too far to walk but not far enough to drive. And that's where we see the maximum market gap between walking and driving. And that's where we're starting to see automation in transportation take place, moving walkways at airports and escalators and elevators and ski lifts and things like that is where we're starting to see automation in transportation. The curve in green is air travel, and we see that it starts to be too far to drive at about 200 miles, and then those two graphs cross 50-50 market share at a distance of about 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers. And that market gap between driving, or it's too far to drive but not far enough to fly, is where we see the sweet spot for ET3 being that 200 to 600 mile trip range. ET3 can also be used to move cargo, and that's not the preferred way to do it in an aircraft. Those engines create a little bit of a vacuum. And this is not really the preferred way to ship containers, but a lot of cargo moves by containers. If everything is built to the same standard in every nation with ET3, all the tubes built to the same diameter, that's the most important thing to get right. Just the lesson that we learned in trains in this country is in the 1830s, 1840s, when they were building out private railway implementations to move things from the mine and coal and timber and things like that. Everybody built those trains to the standard that they thought was best for them, for their economics. And there was a whole mishmash of different gauge widths. Then somebody finally figured out, hey, if these were all the same width, we could network it together. And so those standards, become bottlenecks to further innovation. And so instead of looking at this as a standardized shipping container, we can build those things big enough to move shipping containers, these capsules. If we did that, it would cost 30 times more money to build those tubes. So that means everybody would have to pay 30 times more fare to recover the cost of the system. With an optimized size, instead of hauling the container, why not haul what's in the container? A pallet at a time, minimum shipping quantity. Just that's already been proven that cars and pickups and SUVs, everything that goes to the store in those big shipping containers ends up being taken home in the small vehicles. It's already proven that the small vehicles can move that same amount of capacity. One pair of 5-foot diameter tubes going across the Bering Strait at a design speed of 4,000 miles an hour can move every single pallet on every single container ship traveling between China and the United States, and still have 80% of the capacity available. This shows that people vote with their dollars on what is the optimal vehicle size, and this is the pounds of load capacity of every car model sold in the United States. You see it's very flat at about 858 pounds is the average, and that includes fuel load. So the standard deviation is only 114 pounds. The ideal size of vehicle has already been determined by the market. Why would we want to build the vehicles any other size? Cargo, a pallet at a time. The pallet racking systems are a meter high to accommodate Euro pallets, the most common pallet size in the world, and up to 3 of those pallets would fit in an ET3 capsule. Or a small, very aerodynamic, roadable vehicle. If that had retractable wheels, it could drive right into an ET3 capsule. And then you have your wheels when you get there. Of course, instead of 1/10 of the cost of driving, you'd be 1/3 of the cost of driving, but you'd have your vehicle along with you. What we're looking for is 3 miles. That's all we need to build a 3-mile demonstration at 375 miles per hour. It takes about a mile to get up to speed. The vehicle will coast for a mile. It will go through an interchange during that mile that it's coasting, and it takes a mile to slow back down. Power lines are an ideal place. Railroads, existing roads, right down, or farmland. We will pay 5% of the revenue generated across that land, whether it's owned by public or private entities. So eventually it will become like a lottery, and people will self-organize right-of-ways on the internet. We are bringing space travel conditions down to Earth so that everybody can enjoy them on a daily basis instead of a few lucky astronauts every year. You guys want to come along? Any questions?
I didn't even think about
Really, really good questions. The question is what if something happens to the tube, like there's a lot of hunters out in the woods, and a stray bullet should happen to pierce the tube, and we have a minor leak. Minor leaks like that can be repaired quickly and easily without too much effect on the system, and the vacuum pumps can keep up with that. It wouldn't operate, the system would not operate at top efficiency, but those types of damages have occurred in the Alaska pipeline, and they have means to fix those from outside the tube. Happily, with ET3, it's a much easier fix than it is with something that's trying to squirt out oil. The air sucking in tends to keep the repairs in place, and we have ways to automatically make those repairs. And there are also materials that they have for making fuel tanks in aircraft and automobile that are self-healing, that only a few drops of fuel will leak out if even a 50 caliber bullet goes through it. So happily, most people are not too concerned about stray bullets when we drive along in the car. However, maybe we should be, because a terrorist with a high-powered rifle could pick off a driver of a fuel tank going down the road at 70 miles an hour. That fuel tank has several thousand times more potential energy to do damage than an ET3 capsule moving even 1,000 miles an hour. So if we put everything into perspective, we're not too concerned about stray bullets, but that does kill a few people in transportation-related fatalities. But most people die from operator error and failure to mitigate the conditions of travel, failure to maintain those conditions of travel. ET3 does both of those much, much better than roads and human control. So the safety issues are all outlined in the first patent, deals with what happens in a catastrophic failure if there is a sudden tube breach and suddenly you have air rushing into that tube at Mach 1. Within a fraction of a second, it'll say the vacuum pumps can't keep up with this, and we've got a catastrophic failure. So instead of a bridge dropping in, I was just talking with Rick from Minneapolis about the bridges dropping into the river. And in that case, it might have taken an hour or two before they got the detour signs put up. And I know some of the washouts around here, a few cars continued to drive in after that occurred. So those types of things do happen in transportation, and they will also happen in ET3. If that happens in a fraction of a second, traffic is detoured around that, and that particular branch is isolated, and then a fraction of a second later, the entire branch of tube that is affected by that is flooded with air through apertures that are sized and spaced such that the air rushing in aerodynamically slows the vehicles down at a maximum survivable rate, uniformly, all of them together, and then all that air between the vehicles cushions any potential collisions from that air rushing back into the system. And very quickly, those vehicles can be brought to safe speeds where very, very low risk. And if we compare the relative risk of a worst-case event of high-speed rail, say some terrorist with a cutting torch or just a piece of tool steel 5 or 6 feet long clamps it up against a guideway, it could divert one of those high-speed trains into another one and have a head-on collision with a 400 or 500 mile an hour combined impact speed. With ET3, the same amount of people in those trains would be spread out over 35 times more miles of distance. So the relative risk in ET3 is much, much less than it is in high-speed rail. The relative risk in high-speed rail is 1/10 the relative risk of flying in an airplane. Flying in an airplane is 1/15 of the risk of the most dangerous thing that we do every day is driving cars. And driving in cars is acceptable risk for almost all of us that drove our cars to get here. So if we put this into perspective, ET3 promises to be much, much safer than other modes. Thank you.